There was no thunderclap when Martin Graves met Julia Holloway. No signs from the universe. Just rain. That slow, soaking kind that slicked the pavement and smelled like fresh stone. Martin, hunched under a navy umbrella, passed a woman laughing beneath the red awning of a coffee shop, trying and failing to shake water from a useless broken umbrella. Her laugh stopped him. It was bright and cracked, like music in an empty cathedral. "Some umbrella you've got there," he said, almost surprised by his own voice. She looked up, eyes bright. "It was cheap, like my taste in coffee and men." He chuckled. That was how it started. One coffee turned to two, then to long walks in Hyde Park, then Sunday brunches, holidays together, talks of the future whispered in the hush between midnight and morning. Julia was everything Martin wasn't. Messy, impulsive, deeply alive. Where he calculated and planned, she improvised and danced. He fell in love quietly, the way snow coats rooftops without anyone noticing. They married under an oak tree on her parents' estate. He remembered the way the wind pulled at her veil, how she grinned like a woman who had just stolen something valuable. He thought he was the lucky one. They bought a home, not grand, but warm. Julia painted the walls herself. Martin laid the hardwood floor in the nursery with trembling hands and silent excitement. Then Emily came, red-faced and furious, like a storm born into skin. Theo followed 3 years later, quieter but with eyes too wise for his age. Martin never imagined a life without them. He didn't know it had already begun. It didn't happen all at once. That was the cruelty of it. It came like a change in the weather. Subtle, imperceptible at first, until one day you realize your bones are cold, and you don't remember when the sun last touched your skin. Martin noticed the perfume first. It wasn't her usual scent, not the delicate lavender oil she used after showers, or the soft vanilla she wore when they went out. This was sharper. He noticed it when she kissed him on the cheek late one night, saying she was tired, heading straight for the shower. She lingered in the bathroom too long, the water running even after she stepped out. He pressed his nose to her neck when she slipped into bed and said nothing, just stared at the ceiling, thinking. The next day she wore it again. "You smell different," he said casually. Julia looked up from her phone. "Yeah? I guess I switched. Friend at work had something I liked." "What's it called?" She paused a second too long. "Can't remember. Something French. I'll show you later." She didn't. Martin didn't press. More things followed. Little things. Always the little things. Her phone, once left charging on the kitchen island, was now always in her purse. Always face down. Password changed. She laughed more when texting. Little half-suppressed smiles that never quite reached her eyes when he was near. He caught her once on the balcony, whispering into the phone with her back to him. She claimed it was her sister. But when he brought it up at dinner, Julia's story faltered, then shifted. She started taking more girl nights. Her book club grew in frequency, once a month, then twice, then almost weekly. Sometimes she didn't get back until after midnight, tipsy and humming to herself, cheeks flushed in ways Martin hadn't made them flush in years. He offered to pick her up once. She snapped, "No, I already arranged a ride. Don't worry about it." Then kissed him a little too quickly, as if the act would erase the sting of her tone. The sex changed too. She stopped reaching for him. When he touched her, she hesitated, smiled, distracted, then gave in like it was charity. She moaned at the wrong times. Once, she whispered something, not his name. He didn't say anything that night. He rolled off her, stared at the ceiling again, and felt something loosen in his chest like a button popping off a shirt. Still, Martin tried. He wanted to believe it was life, the grind of jobs and children and exhaustion. Every marriage faced lulls. He bought her flowers. She thanked him, distracted. He made dinner. She praised it, barely eating. One weekend, he booked a babysitter and made dinner reservations, the place where they'd celebrated their 5th anniversary. Julia smiled when he told her, but it didn't reach her eyes. At the restaurant, she was on her phone again, face lit by the screen. He reached across the table, gently closed her hand around the device. "Be here with me," he said. She looked up. "I am here." "No, you're not." Something passed through her eyes. A flicker of guilt or irritation. He didn't know anymore. Then came the photos. He was looking for Emily's birth certificate in the filing cabinet when he found an envelope stuffed behind the folders. Inside were a few Polaroids, old, casual, poorly lit. In them, Julia stood on a beach, laughing. She wore a black one-piece swimsuit. Her hair was sun-kissed, loose. Behind her, barely visible, was a man. Not Martin. He had darker skin, broader shoulders, arms wrapped around her waist from behind. She looked happy, young, carefree. The date on the photo corner was the year Emily was conceived. Martin stared at it for a long time, chest heavy, breathing shallow. He didn't confront her. Not then. Instead, he poured himself a drink and sat in the dark after the children had gone to bed, staring at the photo, wondering how long this had been rotting beneath the surface of his life. The next day, he brought it up. Not the photo, but the feeling. "Are you in love with someone else?" he asked quietly while she folded laundry in the bedroom. Her hands paused mid-fold. She didn't look at him. "No, don't be dramatic. It's a fair question. I'm tired. I'm working full-time, raising 2 kids, and I barely get to breathe. And now you're interrogating me?" "I'm not interrogating you," he said. "I'm trying to save this. Whatever this is." That got her attention. She looked at him for the first time in minutes. "This is just life, Martin," she said, exasperated. "This is what happens when we get comfortable. You want romance? Plan a getaway. You want connection? Try not working 60-hour weeks." So he tried again. He took time off work. He brought her breakfast in bed. He sent her texts in the middle of the day. Flirty ones like they used to send when they were dating. Sometimes she replied. Mostly she didn't. It all came to a head one Saturday morning. He woke early, and for once so did she. He watched her get dressed in silence. Careful, deliberate. Matching underwear, perfume, lipstick. "Book club?" he asked. "Yep," she said without missing a beat. "Mind if I drop you off?" She froze for a half second, then shrugged. "No, I'm good. Laura's picking me up." Martin nodded. Julia turned and kissed him on the forehead. "Love you," she said absently. He didn't reply. Not because he didn't love her, but because something inside him had finally gone still. Not rage, not heartbreak, just stillness, the quiet that comes before the storm. It was supposed to be nothing. Emily had been having nosebleeds. Nothing alarming, just frequent. Their pediatrician recommended a few precautionary blood tests, including a rare antigen panel. They needed Martin's sample as a baseline for matching. Standard, routine. He was with Emily at the clinic when the nurse handed him the release form. He barely glanced at it, checked the box, signed his name, smiled at Emily as she kicked her feet from the edge of the exam table, and hummed to herself, drawing swirls on the paper sheet beneath her. Julia hadn't come. She had an early meeting. He didn't argue. A week later, Martin received a call from a number he didn't recognize. He was on a client call, pacing in his office. He ignored it. Then came the voicemail. A calm, professional voice. "Mr. Graves, this is Dr. Langley from Westbridge Pediatrics. We'd like to speak to you privately regarding Emily's antigen panel results. It's nothing urgent. Please call us back at your convenience." That phrasing, privately, unsettled him. He called back, was put on hold, then transferred. "Mr. Graves," said Dr. Langley, "thank you for returning the call. I'd like to speak to you in person if possible. This week." Martin felt his stomach twist. "Is she okay?" "There's nothing alarming medically, but I'd prefer to discuss it face to face." "Tell me now." A beat of hesitation. "Very well." Langley exhaled, like a man preparing to step through fire. "While reviewing Emily's HLA antigen panel, we noted several inconsistencies with the paternal DNA. We reran the test to rule out lab error. Twice, in fact." Martin's voice dropped to a rasp. "What are you saying? You are not Emily's biological father." The words shattered inside his skull like glass. "No, that's not. You made a mistake. We were careful. I understand how difficult—" "No," Martin cut in. "That's impossible. Run it again. I want it run again." Dr. Langley's voice grew gentle. "Mr. Graves, we also tested the son, Theodore, as a comparative control. The results were the same." Martin's hand tightened around the phone until his knuckles turned white. You're telling me neither of them are mine. I'm very sorry. He didn't remember hanging up. He didn't remember leaving the office. He drove without direction, ending up in a parking lot outside a shuttered bookstore. He sat in the car for hours, staring at the dashboard, hands shaking, his reflection barely visible in the windshield. A ghost of a man. The first tear surprised him, not because he didn't cry, but because it didn't feel like sadness. It felt like rage wrapped in betrayal. He thought of every moment, every scraped knee, every birthday, every bedtime story whispered in a dark room while tiny hands clutched his fingers. He thought of Emily's laugh, the same laugh Julia used to have. He thought of Theo's eyes, always watching, too wise, too still. And now every memory had a shadow over it, an echo. They're not yours. He punched the steering wheel. Once, twice, a third time. Pain shot up his wrist. Good. He wanted to hurt. It was better than feeling nothing. He didn't go home that night. He checked into a hotel on the other side of the city. He sat on the edge of the bed staring at the walls, the TV flickering silently with images of other people's fake problems. He turned it off, pulled his phone out. He stared at Julia's name. He didn't call her. He wouldn't let her voice be the soundtrack to this pain. The next morning, Martin returned to the house like a man returning to a crime scene. He stood in the driveway for several minutes, gripping the steering wheel, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Inside, the house was filled with weekend noise. Theo watching cartoons, Emily playing with her dolls on the floor. Julia came out of the kitchen, smiling. "There you are," she said. "We missed you last night. Everything okay?" Her smile faded when she saw his face. Martin closed the door behind him, locked it, turned around slowly. "We need to talk." She stared at him, something instinctively pulling tight behind her eyes. "What happened?" He didn't answer her. He looked at the kids. "Go upstairs, play in your rooms, please." Emily opened her mouth to protest, but something in his voice made her obey. She took Theo's hand and walked quietly up the stairs. When their footsteps faded, Martin turned to Julia. "They're not mine." Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. He watched the color drain from her face. "What?" "I got the results yesterday, DNA tests, from the pediatrician. Both of them. Neither are mine." She shook her head, visibly trembling now. That can't be right." "Don't," he said, voice sharp as a knife. "Don't pretend. You know." Julia backed against the wall, hand over her mouth. "How long?" he asked. "How long have you known?" She started crying. "Martin, please." "How long?" She dropped to the floor, hands clutching her knees like she was trying to shrink into nothing. "I didn't know for sure until after Theo. I didn't want to believe it. And you were such a good father, and we were happy, and I didn't know how to destroy that." His voice dropped to a whisper. Raw. Broken. "You already had. I never meant to hurt you." He laughed bitterly. "But you did. You let me build a life around a lie. You let me love them, Julia. You stood beside me every Christmas, every doctor visit, every school play, and you knew." "I thought it didn't matter," she sobbed. "You were their father in every way that counts." "Stop saying that," he snapped. "You don't get to decide what counts." He walked into the kitchen, opened the liquor cabinet, poured himself a drink. It was 10 in the morning. She followed barefoot on the tile. "Please don't walk away, please." He turned to face her. For the first time, he didn't see his wife. He saw a stranger wearing her face. "I will never forgive you," he said quietly. She shook her head violently. "Don't say that. Don't take the kids away from me. I'm not doing anything yet, but I will speak to my lawyer. I don't know what happens next. But I can promise you this." He leaned in. "Nothing in this house will ever be the same again." The kitchen lights were too bright. Martin sat at the table, a glass of scotch in one hand, his other pressed flat against the wood grain, like he needed to ground himself. His knuckles were pale, jaw locked, heart steady, too steady, like a man standing in the eye of a hurricane. Julia sat across from him. She looked smaller now. Her mascara was smudged from earlier tears. Her hair, once the careless kind of beautiful, looked like it had been raked through a dozen times with trembling fingers. The silence was thick, choking. "Say something," she whispered. Martin slowly lifted his glass, took a sip. He didn't taste it, didn't feel the burn. You're not even angry? She asked. I'm past angry, he said calmly. You've no idea how quiet rage can be when it's aged just right. Julia opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. I didn't set out to hurt you, he laughed, just once, a dry, humorless sound. But you did. You rewrote our life. Do you understand that? Everything I believed about our family, our children, our marriage, it's a fable now, a pleasant bedtime story with a corpse buried in the final chapter. I was scared, she said, voice cracking. I knew you'd never look at me the same if you found out. And I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want to lose this. You already did. The words landed with a dull, inevitable weight. She flinched. He set the glass down. I need to know who, he said. Her eyes widened. I need to know who, Julia. Her mouth trembled. Martin, don't make me ask again. She stared at her lap, voice like paper. His name was Ethan. He worked in marketing at my agency. It was only supposed to be once. But it wasn't. No. His breath hitched. His eyes dropped to the ring on her finger. Was it love? No, she said, shaking her head. It was a mistake. It was stupid and selfish and impulsive. I thought it was over. But then I found out I was pregnant. And I couldn't tell you. You were so happy. You cried, Martin. You said it was the best day of your life. He stood suddenly, chair scraping the floor. The sound made her jump. He paced back and forth, like a man trying to outrun his own heartbeat. I raised them, he said. I stayed up with them when they were sick. I rocked them to sleep. I held Emily's hand when she had her first asthma attack. I taught Theo to ride a bike. His voice broke. Julia's tears returned. You're their father, Martin. You are. I never told them otherwise. They are yours. No, he said, eyes blazing. They're his. You just let me borrow them. That's not true, she whispered. It is, he said. Every night I kissed their foreheads and told them I loved them. You let me live a lie. She stood then. You think I haven't hated myself every single day for it? I think you learned to live with it, he said coldly, like mold under paint. As long as no one peels back the layers, it doesn't matter, right? She closed her eyes, tears falling freely now. I didn't want to destroy us. You didn't destroy us, he said, stepping closer. You destroyed me. You made me love something that was never mine, and now you expect me to be grateful because I was a good enough actor to pull it off. I never said that. You didn't have to. They both stood still now, breathing heavily. Upstairs there was a soft creak. Martin turned his head sharply, instinct already sensing what it didn't want to find. On the stairs near the top step stood Emily. She wore her pink pajama pants and her favorite owl shirt. Her hair was mussed. In her hand was the corner of her baby blanket. Chewed, frayed. Her eyes were wide. Behind her, Theo peeked out from the hallway, silent as a ghost. Emily, Martin said softly, voice immediately gentler. Go back to bed, sweetheart. Her lip trembled. Why are you yelling? I'm not mad at you, he said. I'm just... Mommy and Daddy are having a very hard conversation. Are you going to leave? She asked. The question punched the breath from his chest. He looked at Julia. She didn't meet his eyes. He walked to the stairs, knelt, looked up at his daughter. I'll never leave you, he said. I promise. She nodded, eyes brimming. He helped her down gently, kissed her forehead, and carried her up to her room. Tucked her in, rubbed her back until her breathing slowed. When he turned to leave, Theo was standing in the hallway. They didn't speak. Martin just placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Downstairs, Julia was sitting on the floor now, head in her hands. When Martin came back down, he stood in the doorway, arms folded. I need space, he said. Starting now. She looked up. Are you leaving? No, you are. What? You'll go stay with your sister or get a hotel. I don't care. I'm staying here until I speak to a lawyer. And the kids. They stay here, he said flatly. They need stability. You can't just... I can, he snapped, and I will. Or I'll tell them the truth myself. Tonight. Julia's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. Martin walked past her, picked up his coat. I'm going out for air. When I come back, you won't be here." She didn't move, just stared at him with hollow eyes as he closed the door behind him. Outside, the cold air slapped his face. He stood on the porch, hands shaking, breath fogging in the dark, and let it all hit him. Everything he built was gone, but he was still standing, and he'd be damned if he let her finish the job. The house felt too clean after Julia left. Her absence wasn't like a hole in the wall. It was a hollow echo in every drawer, every cabinet, every closet that no longer smelled like her perfume. Martin stood in the doorway of the master bedroom and stared at the space on the vanity where her makeup bag used to sit. The dust settled around it like an outline at a crime scene. The kids didn't ask where she went that first week. Maybe they already knew. Maybe they felt it in the air. The way the silence changed tone, like a song cut short. Martin tried to fill that space with routine, brushing teeth, packing lunches, movie nights. But there was a new weariness in him, as if every word took effort to say aloud. He slept on the couch. Too many memories in the bed. 3 weeks later, the first letter arrived. Graves versus Holloway, petition for dissolution of marriage. Julia had hired an attorney in the city, a known name, ruthless, aggressively protective of maternal rights. Martin read the opening line 3 times before he set the papers down and walked outside into the wind. The divorce wasn't unexpected. What gutted him was the tone. Clinical, detached, accusatory in just the right ways. She was making this a war. He hadn't been ready for that. He hired a lawyer the next day. A quiet man named Barlow, recommended by a former colleague. He had calm eyes and a tired voice. Barlow read through the petition in silence. "She's fighting for full custody," he said eventually. "That surprises me." Martin stared out the window. "It doesn't surprise me. She lies like other people breathe." Barlow arched a brow. "There's mention of emotional neglect on your part." Martin snorted, bitter. "She cheated on me, lied about my kids, and I'm the danger?" Barlow slid a pen across the table. "You're not going to fight dirty, are you?" Martin didn't pick up the pen. "I'll fight clean," he said, "but I'll fight hard." The court hearings were brutal. They were small, quiet rooms filled with big words and small people pretending to be gods. Julia looked polished, sympathetic, remorseful. Her lawyer played her like a violin. A woman overwhelmed, shamed, fearful of losing her children, regretful of past mistakes. Martin wore a black suit and said little. He sat with his jaw tight and his heart cinched like a belt around his ribs. His lawyer brought forward the DNA tests, the testimony from the pediatric clinic, and Julia's handwritten admission, an email she sent days after the confrontation, trying to explain herself. In it, she wrote the words, "I was afraid to tell you they weren't yours. I didn't want to lose you." That email became a bullet in court. Still, it wasn't easy. The judge was cautious. Julia's lawyer spun her remorse into virtue. "She never denied his emotional bond with the children," she said. "That's proof of love, of sacrifice, not malice." Martin didn't speak much. When asked why he wasn't pursuing full custody, he answered simply, "Because I'm not going to hurt them more than she already has." That silence, that restraint, bought him more than anger ever could. Outside the courtroom, Martin and Julia met eyes for the first time in weeks. She looked thinner, her cheeks hollow, lips chapped. The woman he once made love to under candlelight on lazy Sundays was now just a face across a battlefield. "You're going to win," she said bitterly. He tilted his head. "There are no winners here." She looked away. "I didn't want this." "You made it." He walked past her, out into the gray afternoon, feeling the cold settle into his spine. The court awarded joint custody with alternating weeks. Martin would have primary physical placement. The kids would live mostly with him during the school year. Julia's visitation was granted, but monitored for 6 months pending psychological review. That ruling broke something in her. Martin didn't celebrate. He just sat in the parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel, forehead pressed to it like a man praying to a car. That first week alone with the children felt like wandering through a museum of the life he used to have. Emily was quiet but watchful. Theo clung to him more than usual. They didn't talk about the divorce. Kids never asked about the things they already knew but couldn't name. Their questions came in softer ways. Why do we have two toothbrushes at Mommy's now? Why do we have to pack clothes every weekend? Do you still love her? Martin answered every question with the same resolve. Calm, truthful, never cruel. I don't live with Mommy anymore. Yes, we both love you very much. No, I'm not mad at you. When they were asleep, he drank in silence. Not to black out, not to forget. Just enough to feel the heat spread in his chest, a contrast to the frozen grief in his stomach. He found the wedding album one night, buried under winter coats in the hall closet. It was dusty, heavy. The leather cover felt like skin. He sat on the couch and flipped through it slowly, page after page. Smiles, vows, the first dance. Julia's eyes bright and full of promise. His arm wrapped tightly around her waist. That look that said, I'd kill the world for you. He shut the book, walked it outside, threw it in the fire pit. The flames licked up their history greedily. He stayed there drinking as their promises turned to ash. A month later, he started therapy. Not because he wanted to, because he had to. For the kids, to keep custody, to prove he was coping. The court loved men who demonstrated emotional regulation. The therapist was a young woman with a soft voice and a sharp mind. She didn't ask stupid questions. She listened more than she spoke. You're grieving, she said one day, not just the marriage, but the illusion, the life you thought you had. He stared at the floor. I don't know who I am anymore. Then that's where we start. In the evenings, he began to write. Not a book, not a letter, just pieces of memory, conversations, moments. His first time holding Emily, the way Theo giggled when he ate strawberries, the smell of Julia's skin on Sunday mornings. He wrote it all out, then tore up the pages and threw them in the trash. It wasn't for remembrance. It was a purge. He never told the children the truth. Not yet. He thought about it. Late at night sometimes he'd stare at their sleeping faces and wonder, when is the right time to say you were born from someone else's blood, but you belong to me anyway? There was no answer. So he waited. One evening, months after the ruling, Julia showed up during her designated weekend pickup. She looked tired. She had let her roots grow out, her makeup gone. When Emily hugged her goodbye, Julia hesitated, then looked at Martin. Thank you, she said softly, for still letting me be their mother. He said nothing, just nodded. It was the closest thing to peace they would ever find. The sea was loud at night. It crashed against the cliffs like a war that never ended. Wave after wave, battering rock, wearing it down by inches. Martin stood on the back porch of the cottage, wrapped in a sweater that still smelled faintly of firewood and sea salt. A glass of scotch sweated in his hand. The children were asleep. The world was quiet, and still he could hear her voice in his head, not screaming, not apologizing, just laughing the way she used to. The kind of laugh that filled rooms and curled into your ribs like warmth. He hated that he still remembered it. After the divorce, Martin moved them to the coast, a small town with crooked fences, battered signs, and locals who kept their heads down and their greetings short. He found a weathered cottage a few miles from the waterline. It had an old stone fireplace and a rotting garden out back. The floorboards creaked with every step, and the windows were drafty in winter. He loved it immediately. It didn't carry any ghosts. Not hers, not theirs, just quiet. He took a leave from work. His boss was understanding. Divorce, custody, all of it. They offered him 6 months. He took 3. The house became a project. He tore out the old cabinets in the kitchen, replaced them with shelves made from repurposed oak beams. He painted the living room a deep green, not because he liked it, but because she wouldn't have. The bedroom remained undecorated, a mattress on the floor, a nightstand, a lamp. That was all he needed. His therapist told him to journal. He tried, for a week. Then he started writing letters instead, not to Julia, but to Emily and Theo. Letters he never gave them. Some were long and confessional, others were one line. I would have died for you before I even knew your name. You smiled at me like I was your whole world, and I was. You're not mine, but I'm still yours. He kept them in a box under his bed, beside a photo album he refused to burn. Grief came in waves, not the sobbing, cinematic kind. Martin didn't cry much. He drank. He walked the cliffs. He sat in the workshop he built in the shed and stared at the half-finished projects, tools in neat rows, sawdust thick on the floor. He found peace in wood, in the slow discipline of shaping something ruined into something useful. He built a table, then a bench, then a bed frame for Emily, carved with constellations. He found himself checking the measurements 3 times before cutting, afraid to make something imperfect again. The children adjusted slowly. They didn't ask to go back to the old house. Emily helped cook on the weekends, pancakes mostly, then eggs when she learned how to flip without breaking the yolks. Theo followed his father like a shadow. He didn't say much, but when Martin held out a hand, he always took it. They never mentioned the courtrooms, or the shouting, or the night Julia left. But Martin saw it in their drawings. Emily's picture of their new home had 3 people. Theo's family portrait didn't include a mother. Martin never corrected them. He just hung them on the fridge. One night, Theo had a nightmare. Martin heard the crying and rushed into the bedroom. The boy clung to him, shivering. He picked him up, carried him back to the master bed, and lay down with him, holding him tight. "What did you dream?" he asked. Theo sniffled. "That you went away." "I'll never leave you," Martin said. The boy looked up at him, uncertain. "But you left Mommy." Martin froze, then nodded slowly. "Sometimes grown-ups can't stay together, but that doesn't mean I'll ever stop being your dad." Theo's small voice came back. "Even if I don't look like you?" Martin's heart fractured again. He pulled the boy tighter. "Especially then." Martin didn't date, not because he was afraid, but because the hunger wasn't there. Not yet, maybe never. Women looked at him. The single dad at the bakery or the hardware store. A few smiled. A neighbor left banana bread once with a note. He threw the note away and ate the bread alone at midnight. It wasn't that he didn't want love again. He just didn't know who he was without the lie. Seasons passed. He took the children to school, picked them up, made dinners, read bedtime stories. He taught Emily how to bait a hook and Theo how to light a fire. He patched scraped knees. He listened when Emily cried after Julia missed her birthday. He didn't say cruel things about their mother, even when she deserved them. He became not just their dad, but their anchor, the only consistent truth in a world that had proven how easily love could lie. Then came the day Emily asked. She was 9. They were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching the ocean swallow the sun. "Why don't I look like you?" Martin didn't flinch. He had practiced this answer. "Because you take after your mom. But Theo and I look different, and I don't have freckles. And your eyes are brown, mine are blue." He looked at her carefully. "Do you think you have to look like someone to belong to them?" "No," she said, unsure. He reached over, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "You belong to me because I chose you. Every day, every second. No one made me. I wanted to be your dad." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "Is that why Mommy cried so much when you left?" He nodded. "Part of it." "Do you hate her?" He shook his head. "No, I just stopped trusting her." Emily leaned against him. "I'm glad you stayed." He held her close, so close he couldn't hear the waves anymore. That night, Martin sat at the dining table, writing a new letter. Not to Emily, not to Theo, to himself. It read, "You are not what was done to you. You are what you chose to become despite it." He folded it, put it in the box. Then he went to bed. And for the first time in a long time, he slept through the night. By the time Emily turned 11, Martin had learned how to speak in measured tones that held the weight of truth without tipping into cruelty. He didn't mention Julia much anymore. He didn't have to. The children had begun drawing their own conclusions. Slowly, and then all at once. The questions changed. Not the small ones. Why does Mommy always cry when she drops us off? Why did we move so far away? But real questions. Hard questions. "Dad," Emily said one Sunday afternoon, "did Mommy cheat on you?" Martin had been chopping carrots. The blade paused mid-stroke. He turned and met her eyes. She didn't flinch. She was old enough now to notice the spaces in conversations, to track tension in adult shoulders. She'd learned to read silences. He set the knife down, wiped his hands. "Where did you hear that?" he asked gently. She shrugged. "I didn't hear it. I just figured." Martin exhaled. "Why do you think that?" "Because you never said bad things about her, but you never said anything good either." He nodded slowly. "I think," he said, "you're old enough to know a little more." She sat at the table, waiting. Martin poured himself some water. "No scotch. Not today." "Your mom and I, we loved each other. For a long time. And we were happy. But then some things happened. Some mistakes that hurt very deeply. And the trust between us broke." Emily's eyes were steady. "Was it about us?" He hesitated. She saw it. "Dad, just tell me." He sat down across from her, folded his hands. "You and Theo have a different biological father." The silence that followed was not shock. It was something deeper, acceptance and pain arriving together. "I'm not mad," she said finally. "Just, I think I already knew. I just didn't want it to be true." Martin reached out, laid his hand on hers. "You're mine. You always were. That never changed." "I know," she whispered and her voice cracked. "I just hate that she didn't tell me." That night, Emily didn't speak much. Martin let her be. But the next day she asked, "Can I call her?" "Of course," he said. He handed her the phone and stepped outside into the cold. He stood on the porch while the wind pulled at his sleeves, staring out at the gray horizon. Behind him, through the glass, he could see her pacing, talking, crying, listening, his daughter breaking apart the myth of her mother piece by piece. He thought maybe he should feel sorry for Julia, but he didn't. He just felt done. A week later, Julia called. He stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Martin," she said, "can we talk?" He walked outside again, sat on the stone bench near the garden. The winter had killed most of it. All that remained were withered stalks and dry soil. "I'm listening." She was quiet. "She asked me things I wasn't ready to answer." "You had 11 years to get ready." "I didn't want to hurt her." Martin laughed bitterly. "You already did. You just didn't have to watch it back then." Silence stretched. "I want to see them more," she said. "I want to rebuild what I can." Martin closed his eyes. "They're not broken," he said. "They're cautious. They're confused. And they're stronger than you were when you lied to them. I know I've lost my place, but I'm still their mother." He said nothing. "You still hate me." "I don't," he said truthfully. "But I also don't care anymore. You're not part of my story now. You're part of theirs. And they'll write the ending." She choked out something that sounded like a sob. "You always were the better parent." "No," he said. "I was just honest." Then he hung up. That night, Martin lit a fire and opened the old box of letters. He pulled one out. The first one he ever wrote. The one that began, "I would have died for you before I even knew your name." He read it again. Then he picked up a pen. And on the back of that letter, he wrote something new. "But I lived for you instead." He showed it to Emily the next morning. She read it slowly, her fingers tracing the ink. "You don't need to show me this," she said. "I wanted you to have it anyway." She hugged him hard, with all her weight, not like a child seeking protection, but like a girl trying to keep someone from drifting away. "You never left," she said into his chest. "Never," he whispered. That weekend, when Julia arrived for visitation, Martin stayed outside on the porch. She came early. She didn't wear makeup. Emily stepped outside to meet her, arms crossed. "I want to talk," Julia said softly. "I'm not ready," Emily replied, "but I'll ride in the car." They left quietly. Theo didn't say goodbye. He stayed inside with Martin playing chess. Halfway through the game, the boy looked up. "She lied about everything, didn't she?" Martin thought about lying, about protecting, but he'd promised himself, no more lies. "Not everything," he said, "just the most important thing." Theo nodded. Then, "But you stayed." Martin smiled. "Yeah, I stayed." And that, he thought, was all that mattered now. The cottage was quiet in spring. A rare kind of quiet, not empty but full of things returning, soft bird calls in the trees, the rustling of green buds in the breeze, and the occasional sharp squeal of children laughing in the distance. Martin stood in the backyard, sleeves rolled up, soil under his fingernails. The old garden he once left to die was now breathing again. Emily had helped him plant it, carrots, tomatoes, herbs. Theo had dug trenches with too much enthusiasm and uneven hands. They'd laughed through the whole thing. The garden had no memory of Julia, and that made it sacred. He hadn't spoken to Julia since the winter call. There were emails, formal ones, custody scheduling, school logistics, parent-teacher appointments. Her tone was always careful now, like someone tiptoeing around a sleeping bear. Martin responded when he had to, but never more than that. She had, in the end, become what he feared most, a stranger with memories, and he'd made peace with that. One evening, an envelope arrived in the mail. No stamp, no address, just his name, handwritten in looping cursive. He knew her handwriting instantly. He stared at it on the kitchen counter for a day and a half before opening it. Inside, a single letter. Martin, I won't ask you to read this. I wouldn't blame you if you burned it unopened, but if you do read it, I want you to know this isn't about forgiveness. I'm not arrogant enough to expect it anymore. This is just the truth. Finally, as bare as I can make it. What I did to you was more than a mistake. It was a theft. I stole your life and replaced it with something I made up. I built a story around you because you were too good, and I didn't think I deserved that kind of devotion. Ethan was nothing. That sounds cruel, but it's true. A mistake I made out of loneliness, resentment, and boredom. The second time, I don't even know what to call it. Cowardice, maybe. I don't know who I was back then, but I know who you were. You were better than I deserved. You were a father when you didn't have to be. You never ran, never threw it back in my face, even when you had every reason to. You stood in court and protected my name, even when I buried yours. I don't expect you to remember me fondly, but I hope you look back and know that at least some part of me loved you. Even if I didn't know how to honor that love. I am sorry for the rest of my life. I'll be sorry. Julia. Martin read it once, then again. He folded it slowly, tucked it into the back of the same box where he kept the letters to the children. But not next to them. He placed it in a blank envelope, unwritten, unmarked. The final story of a woman who had once been the world, now reduced to paper and apology. That night, Martin sat at his desk and began a new letter. This one was different, not to the children, not to himself, to no one, or maybe to everything. Dear Ghost, you don't live here anymore. The house doesn't remember you. The walls don't whisper. The sheets don't smell like you, and the floors don't creak when you're gone. Your voice is no longer a razor in my head. Your laugh doesn't come with a dagger. And when I see your eyes in Emily or Theo, I no longer think of what you did. I think of what I've done since. I carried your sins for years. I bled for them, cried for them, screamed in the dark while the waves drowned the world outside. And now I'm done. You're not my story anymore. I am. Goodbye. He folded the letter, didn't save it, didn't box it. He lit a match and watched the paper curl into ash in the fireplace, the last fire he'd ever need for her. That weekend, Martin drove the kids to the cliffs. They'd been asking for weeks. It had rained the night before, and the air was sharp and clean. Emily ran ahead, camera in hand. Theo kicked stones over the edge, listening for echoes. Martin stood at the edge and looked out at the same sea he had once stared into, wondering if it would ever stop hurting. It had, not all at once, but steadily, relentlessly. The way waves wore down even the sharpest stone. As they walked back to the car, Theo slipped his hand into Martin's. Can we go camping next weekend? He asked. Yeah, Martin said. We'll pack a tent and marshmallows. And fishing rods? Martin smiled. And fishing rods. Emily called back from ahead. Can I bring the telescope? All yours, he said. They climbed into the truck. The engine turned over. Martin checked the mirror. The empty road behind him. Then the horizon. Then drove. Forward.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Story Time with Papa Owl. If you enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe.